So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what eICU is, because it primarily takes place in the U.S., and I want to make sure everyone understands, and then I'll talk about how I ended up in Australia. So for disclosures and disclaimers, I don't have any. No financial interests or other conflicts. I just want to say that my opinions are mine. They are not representative of those at Emory or Philips Healthcare, who is a partner we work with. I'm a customer of theirs. So eICU stands for Electronic ICU. This is a program that employs technology coupled with experienced Emory critical care nurses and intensivists. We remotely provide support for the bedside staff in caring for critically ill patients. Our system that we use allows us to preemptively identify when patients are veering off trajectory, and then we give early notifications and early interventions for rescue. We provide support, but we never supplant the staff at the bedside. We are actually located in a remote location. This is basically how we see critical care in the future, but you'll see there's a patient room. Does this work? The pointer, how do you make it work? I am so good. So here's a typical ICU patient room. And our location is actually, we're off-site. We're not in a hospital. We're located in a doctor's building. And what we're trying to do is help bring expertise to the bedside. In the U.S., many, many hospitals do not have consultants or even trainees at night. Primarily, nurses are the ones in the hospitals taking care of the patients. Most of the hospitals in the U.S. do happen to have emergency departments. So if there are patient emergencies, decompensation, they need intubation, line insertion, things of that nature, the ED physician can provide that. But as far as physician oversight, there's none physically in the hospitals. This is the area we operate in. My co-director there is Tim Buckman. He's the medical director of the program, and this is our area. We monitor patients in 5 different hospitals, 11 ICUs, and 136 beds across those. The closest hospital we monitor is across the street. The furthest one is about 350 kilometers away. This is the system that we use that allows us to do what we do. Our nurses all have multiple screens like this, the nurses and the physicians, and we run about 12 applications simultaneously all the time. There are different data feeds from the bedside monitors and from the patient's medical record, lab system, pharmacy system, admit-discharge system, and it feeds into our program and has different algorithms built and alerts us to when a patient is veering off trajectory. It has different trending alerts rather than just a high or low. So if a patient's pressure, their mean pressure is drifting down, and someone at the bedside may not be aware of it over the last 30 minutes, we actually get alerts related to that others don't get. And that's where we use the Philips system. So 4 of the screens on the left are actually the Philips system. The ones in the middle, the bottom one is Cerner, which is the EMR all of our facilities have. This one is functionality in the Philips system. It actually allows us to go in the room, look, and speak with the staff or the patient, the family at the bedside. This is equipment that's in the room. All the rooms have a monitor, a camera, a speaker, and a mic. So as I said, we have bidirectional communication. The button on the right is a button that the nurses or other medical staff in the unit, they just press the button in the room. It sends us a message and we know they need us. And then we actually open the camera session and go in the room to talk to them. This is what it looks like in a patient room. It has the clinician's name and their credentials, so everyone in the room knows who they're talking to. With this program, we went live in 2014, and we went live with the support of a federal grant. With the federal grant, the government decided to appoint an independent auditor to our program. They looked at 8,000 patients over 15 months. And these are just the results of the data that they got. They found that we had a decrease in spending for our patients compared to 9 hospitals in our region of $1,486 per patient. Over the 15 months, it was a savings of $4.6 million for the federal government. We also had a decrease in 60-day readmission rates for our patients. Less patients went to long-term care, more patients went home. I give you all this information because I want you to understand that we support staff, we provide remote services, but we make a difference. Dr. Buckman and I thought, after he worked 120 nights in 2015, that we needed to try and find a way to mitigate the effects of working night shift. I think everyone's familiar with many of these research surveys that have been done that discuss the deleterious effects of working the night shift. We have increased sleep disruption, GI disorders, circadian rhythm disturbances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we decided to do was to turn night into day. Dr. Buckman had an acquaintance at Macquarie Uni, and he got in touch with him and said, we would like to do a research study. What we did was we took our staff, one physician and one nurse, and we relocated them to Sydney, Australia. We built a mini area like the one we have in Atlanta, right here, and our physician and nurse delivered the nighttime care from Sydney to the patients in Atlanta, Georgia at Emory during the daytime hours. This is the exact time frame. This is my nurse, Brad. You see it's very dark because it's 2 a.m., and this is here. My physician is Jim, and Rick is there, and actually I'm there. So this is the same time frame. The key elements of the study were we partnered with Macquarie Uni. We built a mini clinical operations room, which is what we call the area where we work. We relocated our intensivists and nurses, have these members cover the night shift. I just told you all this. I'll skip that one. We also operated our eICU home area in Atlanta at the same time. So we didn't close one and open another one. There were staff in Atlanta, and there were staff here working simultaneously. In order to do this, we had to find a way to overcome many obstacles. One of those was patient confidentiality and security. So we ended up building a fiber circuit from Atlanta to Macquarie Uni, and all of the computers and telephones there were on the Emory circuit. So we were not transmitting any patient data at all. It was all living on our own network. We also created, in this, the next slide. In this picture, this is actually the doctor, and he's talking to Brad, the nurse you just saw, in Atlanta. We also created a video connection, so our clinicians on either side of the world could talk to each other by just pressing a button. They didn't have to go through phone calls or texts or emails. It gave them immediate access to the physicians. The basic routine is that a nurse finds an issue, they're sort of the triage people, and if it needs to be accelerated up to the physician, then they speak to the physician about what they see going on. So it was imperative that the clinicians in Atlanta could talk to the physician here and vice versa with very little trouble. We used our clinicians as study subjects. We looked at different assessments, work-related assessments, which is the number of camera sessions, how many times someone went into a room, how long they were on the sessions, and the number and complexity of the notes that they wrote. We also looked at different variables for them. We had them fill out mood surveys, sense of well-being. We had them all wear a little device, so we monitored their heart rate variability and sleep patterns. We had them do a Stanford sleepiness scale. They all performed salivary stress markers and cognitive efficiency testing. These were done at various points during the shift, and we had a pre-intervention time during the time they were here, and then we had a post. The data is still being analyzed, and I don't have much to show you, but I'm going to show you something that did come up in very early analysis. One of the tests we had them do was a trail making test. It's validated by neuropsychological tests, and it looks at visual attention and task switching. It consists of two parts, Part A and Part B, in which the subject is instructed to connect a set of dots. The test can provide information about visual search speed, scanning, speed of processing, mental flexibility, as well as executive functioning. These are the two different tests. Test A and Test B. Test B is more difficult than Test A. Test A is connecting the dots in an ascending numerical order, so 1 through 25. And if you made an error, you had to go back and start again. Test B is more difficult because it's numeric and alphabetical. So you have to do 1A, 2B, 3C. And again, if you have an error, you have to go back and start again. What we found, which was interesting, this is a set of data from one of my nurses. And it looks at, we had them test at the beginning of the shift and the end of the shift for the trail making. This is the nights before, when he was working nights in the U.S. This is during a jet lag period. We actually gave everyone 7 days to acclimatize when they got here before they worked. I know, it was great. They loved it. And then this was after they started working day shift. And you'll notice a big difference between the day shift, beginning, end shift, and the night shift here. But the jet lag one is pretty significant. What we found in general is that our clinicians completed the tests, both of them, much faster than the average time. The average time for the A test is 25 to 29 seconds, and our clinicians completed it in 12 to 14.26. The B test is usually completed in 49 to 75 seconds, and our clinicians finished it in 17.76 to 23.78 seconds. We are very preliminarily attributing this to the fact that our clinicians are used to working with multiple applications and they're very familiar with technology. So maybe the tasks are easier for them because they're used to doing all the multitasking with the screens, but we're not sure. This is just an example of the self-reported fatigue level scale that they completed, and they also did this at the beginning and the end of the shift, and I don't have the data analysis for this yet. I do have some anecdotal feedback, though. This is from 2 night nurses. The first nurse has worked nights for 35 years, the second one for 25. She said, although I've been a long-time night shift worker and I believed I have successfully flipped back and forth from nights to days, I found that being on a consistent day schedule means I sleep pretty much the same number of hours every night and wake up before my alarm goes off every day. And she said to me, because I was here when she was here for 9 weeks, and she said, God, I never realized how crappy I feel. Because she'd done it for so long, and as she said, she thought that she had worked really well and adapted. My other nurse is actually in a master's program. So he started his master's program, was working full-time, and then came here to participate, continuing to be in the program because it was online. He said, the most significant aspect for me was the change from working nights to days. I felt like I had more time. When working nights, you can either sleep when you get home or stay up all day and change to a day routine. Either way, you feel tired and exhausted, especially working 3 or 4 12-hour shifts in a row. In Australia, I completed my assigned shifts, went home and slept. The next morning, I was able to accomplish whatever I had planned. I was not exhausted and not lose a day just to make up for the transition from nights to days. He got an A that semester. This was recently, I just saw this a couple of days ago. It was published, and a Nobel Prize was awarded to a group that made discoveries in molecular mechanisms controlling the circadian rhythm. This is exactly why we did what we did. This study was in England, but it talks about regularly at night, many people provide essential critical services on which Britain's smooth running depends. They're doctors, nurses, police, firefighters, paramedics, transport, maintenance crews, cleaners, call center workers, bakers, security guards, factory workers. It's not just bad for us, it's bad for everyone. All these people ensure your life runs like clockwork in the daytime. For them, the experience of working against the body clock, of feeling jet lagged, isn't an occasional annoyance due to travel. It's a regular fact of life. We really wanted to attempt to recognize this in our clinicians and do what we could to help mitigate it. Administration at our hospital decided this was valuable. So our research project was from July to December last year. In January, we began a program at Royal Perth Hospital with Perth. Time difference is a little bit better. Royal Perth is 12 hours from the U.S. Sydney is 14, 15, 16, depending on daylight savings time. So my staff ended up working 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and that really was not their favorite. So we're going to Royal Perth, where it's 12 hours difference, and we will begin a 2-year program, no longer a research project. Our administration feels that there's a lot of value for retention and recruitment if people feel they're allowed to do this. And everyone that came loves it. That's all I have. I wish I knew how to do that.